How's it going, guys and gals? This is Elderbo coming back at you. We're picking back up, so let's take a look. All right, here, let's see. Path of Exile 2 has been live for just over a week. We addressed some feedback already and are working on more fixes for key pain points in upcoming patches. The full patch notes are coming soon, but check out some of the more significant changes below. Gameplay features. Like we mentioned last week, we'll be adding the capacity to fast travel between checkpoints within an area, as well as adding many more checkpoints to an area. Generally, at all entrances and exits to the area, meaning if you find these first, you'll be able to instantly travel to them to continue exploring. We'll also be making passive points respeccing cheaper, especially at higher levels. It had a relatively aggressive curve getting more expensive with character level. We have flattened that curve so it doesn't exponentially grow as much. This should generally result in approximately 40 to 50% less gold cost for respeccing between the start and the middle of endgame progression. Trial of the Sekhemas. Players were finding Trial of the Sekhemas particularly frustrating in close range, so we've reworked how honor damage scales when in close range, as well as fixing an important bug that was causing players to take far too much honor damage from damage over time. I knew it. Honor damage now scales down based on distance to enemies. When in close range, you'll take 35% less honor damage, tapering off as you are further away from monsters. Fixed a bug where damage over time was dealing 3 times as much damage to honor as intended, and fixed a bug where honor resistance was only applying to 2/3 of that damage. This was confusing for us too. Skitter golems no longer use basic attacks and instead now just explode. Serpent clans burrow and ambush attacks now has improved visual telegraphing and cannot be used from as far away. Volcanoes created by Rattle Cage's Fisher Slam now last half the duration. That last one I don't think needed to be changed, just FYI. Endgame and monster balance. Generally, the balance in endgame maps was more punishing than intended, so we've toned down the damage in a number of ways and disabled certain on-death effects where the telegraphing was not as clear as it should have been. Maps no longer have additional elemental resistance penalties inherently applied at tier 6 and tier 11 or higher maps. It is now consistent across all endgame. Chaos damage now also scales less aggressively over the endgame. Critical strikes from monsters now deal 40% less bonus damage. Lowered the baseline monster density of breach encounters primarily by reducing the frequency of the elite monsters appearing. Well, that's kind of sucks because that was like some of the best juice right there. Disabled the volatile crystal modifier. We'll revisit this in the future pending telegraphing improvements. This one didn't need to be changed. This one didn't need to be removed. You could see that they were covered in crystals and that they were shooting crystals under you. Purple explosives created by volatile plants modified on rare monsters now deal significantly less damage, so that one did need to be changed, and they didn't like this one called for more removing in my personal opinion, because sometimes they'd spawn the plants right on you, you wouldn't even see them. But this other one, the crystals, that should have stayed. The siphoning flash charges modifier on monsters drain 10 times less flash charges per second. This was unintentionally draining way too many flash charges. That's fair. These changes should generally result in a game that is much more survivable than before and will continue to address problematic cases as they arise. Let's see, character and item balance. We've made charm modifiers on belts substantially more common and now appear at much lower levels. The of symbolism modifier now appears from level 23 onward, and the of inspection modifier now appears from level 64 onward. Electrocute is now 25% harder to build up, but the damage penalty has been removed from the support gem. Added a new lightning damage and electrocute cluster to the passive tree in between the ranger and the monk section. It is now more difficult to chain freeze enemies by reducing the amount of freeze buildup applied after a freeze has been applied. Okay, so that one's gonna affect me specifically, but we'll see how bad it is. The Hunter Talisman notable now grants +1 charm slot. The small passive skill leading up to it now grants the stat it formerly gave. The charm helper text has been updated to indicate that you cannot have more than 3 charm slots unlocked, so that we can add more sources of it in the future. Okay, skill and support gem balance. Since launch, we've unfortunately had to nerf a few skills that were far too overpowered. How do we define overpowered? Basically, it's a situation in which a certain skill is so powerful that players feel no other method of playing in the game is viable. Generally speaking, we are trying to do this in a way that doesn't make a build bad, but we can make mistakes. Ideally, any truly meta shifting changes will only happen at the same time as a content patch with a new league to play in. But that doesn't mean we haven't been looking at underpowered skills and support gems. We've got a number of changes planned which should improve some of these skills. The full list change will be in the patch notes, but here's a sample of what you can expect. Improvements to Rolling Slam and all shield skills in Mace section. Improvements to various bow skills, especially the skills used to generate frenzy charges. Improvements to Bone Spell and Chaos Damage over time spells in the Occult section. Improvements to various crossbow skills, especially those at higher tiers. And improvements to some of the underachieving quarterstaff abilities. Alongside all of these skill gem improvements, we've also done a pass over the support gems. We've added 2 new supports and removed or lessened the penalties on many others, notably the fire, lightning, and cold exposure supports. Added the tremor support gem, which can be used to give up to multiple more aftershocks to skills with a damage penalty. Added the bidding support gem, which can be used to give more damage to the command skill of the supported minion. Okay. The fire exposure, lightning exposure, and cold exposure support gems no longer penalize damage of support skills. They now have a mana cost multiplier of 120%. There are also some notable nerfs to a few of the remaining overachieving skills. Skeletal Arsonist spirit cost now matches the other 2 skeletal mages. This should result in a slight decrease in the number of arsonists at high level. A nerf to the damage over time component on very high levels of Tornado and Vine Arrow. These were never intended to be dealing damage themselves, but more so act as a way for other skills to propagate damage. And Magnetic Salvo can now only use your stuck lightning arrows as opposed to those created by your party members. Okay. As we wind down for the holidays season, we wanted to thank you all for our most successful launch so far. We could not have done it without all of your support. A lot of our team will begin to take some much needed rest over the next few weeks, but we look forward to getting back on in the new year refreshed and ready for an exciting year of development in 2025. Happy holidays, Exiles. All right, so overall, some good changes. There's some that I didn't think were really mandatory, like this one. They really didn't need to take that out. You could totally see when those crystals were popping off.